All right, good evening. It is Tuesday evening here in Oregon, just a couple of minutes before 7, and I'm getting started a little early. Let me see if I can't get this one to cock a little bit better here. So I know I'm getting started a little bit earlier than usual here, and but hope you've had a good day. Actually, originally was the forecast was not for very good weather today in Oregon, but it actually turned out to be a pretty nice day with some pretty nice weather. And so Cassie and I were able to get out and go for a walk for a little bit, and so that was nice. Have the windows open a little bit and enjoy that. So I hope you're enjoying the day today as well. And we're going to kind of jump in here in just a minute to these thoughts on the family. Hey, Eric, hope you're doing well. Man, I'll tell you what, I miss you. I miss you a lot. And I hope that we can get together well, whenever the Lord lets us. But I do want to let you know that I think about you and pray for you. And so he may have brought more people to our church Facebook page than anybody else. I've noticed sometimes when people will like our Facebook page, new people like our Facebook page, I'll scroll through and see who our mutual friends are that maybe they know. And so many of them have been Eric Kelly. And so that's been a big encouragement, even from a distance. And I appreciate that. Appreciate many of you who tune in faithfully. So let's jump in tonight. We're going to talk about this idea of encouraging the use of character, gifts, talents, and abilities. Good to see Emily and Hope on as well, and Hope probably knows about some of these things as well, even when it comes to being a teacher. And some of these things can be applied in that instance as well. From my perspective, I can't think of any parent that doesn't want to see their child succeed. Everybody wants to see their kids succeed. And so we have to ask ourselves, how do we cultivate these gifts and abilities that our kids have? And we want to do that. We want them to succeed in the cultivating of their gifts and abilities. But how do we do that and simultaneously cultivate character? Yes, it's good to have Daniel and Owen as well. Owen, listen, Carolina, and I'd heard that, yeah, Daniel and Karen are back on this side of the country. Bill and Rita, glad to see you guys as well. Joan's tuning in, and he would be familiar with this story as well when we're talking about encouraging the building and cultivating of gifts and abilities while simultaneously cultivating character. When I first got there to the church in North Carolina, I had some kids in the youth group that were very athletic. And I think I've shared this story at Pioneer before as well. I had one parent come to me and say, "Hey, we're going to let our son start to play baseball whenever there's a baseball game, because the only way he's going to get into college is if he does it via scholarship." And so we're just letting you know. And they even told me when they started, "Hey, I know you're not going to like what we're about to tell you, but if he has a baseball tournament on Wednesday, or if he has a baseball tournament on Sunday, we're going to let him skip these church gatherings so that he could participate in these baseball tournaments." And so they were cultivating his gifts and abilities, but they weren't simultaneously cultivating character in him. And unfortunately, I'm not going to get into all of it tonight, but there's a sad ending to that story. Things did not work out well for that family and for that young man. And I think part of it was because it was unbalanced on what they tried to cultivate within their child. And so the question is, how do we get to the point where they excel as an athlete or a musician or some other way, but also at the same time show kindness or compassion in moments when it's needed, where they can be gracious in victory and compassionate towards the team that they just beat, or maybe they tried out for an orchestra or something and they won the first chair, and so they've developed that talent, but also could be compassionate to that person who worked hard to win that chair as well, but didn't get it that year. How do we do that? I think one of the great examples we have in the Bible is Daniel. in the book of Daniel, it says in Daniel chapter 1, verses 1 through 8, it says this: In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel and of the king's seed and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored, and skillful in wisdom and cunning and knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, in whom they might teach the learning in the tongue of Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Now among these were of the children of Judah Daniel, Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and to Hanani of Shadrach, to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor of the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. So here are Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They're taken captive in Babylon. Babylon had a reputation for being a center of education and culture. And as we read through this passage, Daniel had already exhibited some prowess in those areas of education and understanding and all of those kinds of things. And being put in this situation as a teenager, and by the way, some people say Daniel could have been as young as 14 at this time. Being put in this situation, he could have been enamored with the surroundings and just kind of gone with the flow. But Babylon wasn't just the center of education and culture. It was also a wicked and sinful center for idol worship. There was a giant temple to the false god Marduk there. And the situation that Daniel found himself in, he was being recognized for his gifts. And he was even being shown special treatment because of them. Yet we have this young man who stood for God. I think every parent would want to raise a Daniel, a young person who could flourish in their gifts and talents and abilities, but still have the character to stand up for God and for truth. And so I want to share just some real practical ways about how we do that. And so first of all, let me say this. If we're going to do this, first of all, we need to make character a priority. Daniel was gifted. Verse 4 tells us that he was skillful in wisdom and cunning in knowledge and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace. He was mentally sharp. He was socially poised. He knew how to handle himself in different social situations. But when he was confronted with a dilemma that went against his convictions, Daniel was unmoving. As a matter of fact, he was so unmoved. He was so the character was so ingrained in him that he was able to take the ability that he had and the talent and the gift that he had and the character that he had and put it together. And even in this emotionally charged situation, he was able to diffuse it and kindly persuade the authorities that were over him to change. I mean, look at let me read verses 9 through 12. It says, Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who hath appointed your meat and your drink, for why should he see your faces worse likening than the children which are of your sort? Then shall ye make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel to Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over Daniel, Hanani, Mishael, and Azariah, Prove thy servants, I beseech thee, 10 days, and let them drink, give us pulse to eat and water to drink. And verse 13 says, Let our countenance be looked upon before thee, and the countenance of the children that eat of the portion of the king's meat, and as thou seest, deal with thy servants. So he consented to them in this matter, and proved them 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, their countenance appeared fairer and fatter in the flesh than all the children which did eat the portion of the king's meat. Then Melzar took away the portion of the meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. In Daniel chapter 2, later on, in verses 12 through 16, it says this, For this cause the king was angry and very furious, and commanded to destroy all the wise men of Babylon. And the decree went forth to the wise men that they should be slain, and they sought Daniel and his fellows to be slain. Then Daniel answered with counsel and wisdom to Arioch, the captain of the king's guard, which was gone forth to slay the wise men of Babylon. He answered and said to Arioch, the king's captain, why is this decree so hasty from the king? Then Arioch made this thing known to Daniel. Then Daniel went in and desired of the king that he would give him time and that he would show the king the interpretation. So here's this young man that had loads of talent and ability, but also had the character to stand up what was right. And he was in the king's court, yet at the same time had a backbone. And I do think, and we've heard plenty of sermons preached on it before, I do think Daniel chapter 1 and verse 8 is pivotal, where it says Daniel purposed in his heart. The word purpose means to set, or to direct toward, or to determine. These decisions that Daniel was making in the heat of the moment, were already settled in his heart. He had the principles and convictions that guided his decisions in crisis moments. They were already there. In order for that to happen, though, they had to be cultivated into his heart. And it made me think about Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 9, where it says this. Deuteronomy chapter 4 and verse 9 says, only take heed to thyself and keep thy soul diligently, lest thou forget the things which thine eyes have seen, and lest they depart from thy heart all the days of thy life, but teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons. I think there's a pattern that's given to us about cultivating these things in the hearts of the people that come behind us. And the very first part is to take heed to our own lives. And so I just said a moment ago, we should make character a priority, but not just the character of the people that we're trying to raise up to be godly and to have a backbone, but our own character. We're supposed to be obeying God from the heart ourselves. And then we teach those things to our children and our grandchildren, making emphasis on the heart so that we're embedding the truth of God into their souls and not just requiring proper action. As a matter of fact, my kids don't know this, but when I'm done with you today, we're going to be doing this exact same thing tonight. The last couple of weeks being home, the way Cassie and I have noticed and been worried about some of the changes in their demeanor and in their attitudes towards us and towards each other. And so as parents, we're going to have, during our family devotional time, we're going to deal with some of these character issues and prioritize it. I want to say this: when you have to choose between developing talent or developing character, make character the highest priority. Second, though, help them discover spiritual gifts. Help them discover spiritual gifts. So how do I do that? First of all, just observe, just watch them. Just watch your children. Watch to see, do they have a desire or ability to teach, or a desire to serve and help, or a desire and ability to clearly articulate truth, or the ability to encourage others in the faith, or the desire to give to God and to his people, or do they enjoy leading and administering, or are they empathetic to the pain of others and have a desire to help? I mean, just watch them and observe, and it won't be really hard to tell. But also say this: encourage them when you see them serving and using their abilities to serve the Lord. Proverbs, the writer of Proverbs 23 says this. He says in verses 15 through 16, my son, if thine heart be wise, my heart shall rejoice, even mine. Yea, my reins shall rejoice when thy lips speak right things. I think it's important for us to point out to our children when we see that God is working in their heart. I shared a couple of nights ago the time where we felt the Lord, the Holy Spirit, dissuading us from letting Gabe go to a sleepover. I told that on here before. And later on, I think we decided that was the right decision. We certainly saw that play out. And if you aren't familiar with that story, you can go back and find it a couple, maybe last time or 2 times ago, where we talked about that. But, one of the things when we let Gabe know that decision, Gabe had a really good attitude about it. Even though he was affected by that decision. And so I made sure to make a point to express that to him. Hey, I know that's probably not what you wanted to hear, but I appreciate you, not getting mad, not getting frustrated. He just took it in stride. And so I think it's important for us to point it out to them. Hey, I appreciate you having that way or working that way. I would say this as well: be alert to their desire to serve. Don't squelch it. If you go to a local church somewhere, don't be the kind of person who shows up at the last second and leaves first thing. You say, well, why not? Because that steals the opportunity away from them to serve. If you come a little early, stay a little late, even though they may not have a place to serve yet, they may see other people serving and just jump in to help. But if you shoot in at the last second and you take off when things are done, you actually steal that opportunity from them. But I do want to encourage you again to really motivate them. There's a powerful motivator that's praise. And so tell them and write them notes and praise them whenever they're using their gifts to serve. And then lastly, I want to say this tonight. So not only make character priority, not only help them discover their spiritual gifts, but number three, invest in their natural gifts. Proverbs 18 and verse 16 says, a man's gifts maketh room for him and bringeth him before great men. Talent that is developed through persistent diligence can open up opportunities for God honoring success that maybe nothing else can. Basically, natural gifts fall into three categories. There's creative gifts, there's physical gifts, and there's academic gifts. And I want us to know that they're all great. They're all God given. They're all important. I mean, just think about creative gifts. God was creative in creation. When we see that, David was a musician. In Exodus, we read about a man by the name of Bezalel who was artful and skilled. Think about the psalmist and many of the writers of scripture who were so good with literature. Solomon was a great constructor. Jesus himself was a carpenter. There are so many creative areas that we see played out even in the Bible. And today there's other ones like computer skills or photography or graphic design or drawing or drama or video production. And I understand that cultivating those in our young people can be expensive. But I do want to encourage you that when you find something your child is passionate about, invest in that, because I do think it'll pay off. It'll be worth it. It's so, I can't tell you how many times as an adult I went, man, I wish I would have learned to play the piano. I wish I would have learned to. I wish I would have invested more time in learning to play the guitar. Or we've discussed, man, we wish we would have gotten our kids into music earlier, maybe playing the violin or something like that. And so encourage those things. There's also physical gifts or physical abilities. The funny thing is with the physical, some people obsess over it, and some people just absolutely ignore it as if it doesn't matter. But 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 19 does remind us that our body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, and so it's important for us to help our children take care of them, to take care of their bodies. If we don't, they'll destroy them, especially during like this time of isolation we're in right now. I think it's important for us to really be really careful to schedule them. It's funny because, when they were in school, they were so occupied with school, they didn't have the refrigerator or the snacks right there. And even our kids are just like we're having to schedule it for them to not go crazy with it. I think it's important for us to try to help them with their diet and regular exercise and more sleep. And by the way, if you have school-age children, doctors say they need between 9 and 11 hours of sleep. If they're a high schooler, it's between 8 and 10. And I know they're not going to teachers right now, but teachers struggle to keep kids' attentions because they're playing video games half the night. They grab a donut on the way out the door. And then they're hyperactive because the sugar that they take in messes up their metabolism. And then we try to medicate them to fix all of that. It's amazing what can happen if we just help them a little bit physically with some of these things. And then lastly, it's the academic side. Again, Daniel chapter 1 and verse 4 says that Daniel was skilled in all wisdom, cunning in knowledge, understanding in science, and he was he just naturally excelled at that. The truth of the matter is, not every kid naturally excels at academics. Some will struggle with academics. But I think it's important for us to make sure that all of our kids know that academics matter. Encourage them to try their best, even when they're not the kid that's at the top of the class. I have this conversation with my kids often on the way to school, and it's in my prayers for them when we pray together about school, and that is that they will give their best effort. I hope my kids know right now that I don't expect them to be A students. I expect them to be students so that give their best effort. And if that's an A, then that's what I'm going to expect. But if it's a B, or if it's a C plus that can get to a B minus, that's acceptable because as long as they are trying their best. I just want to encourage you tonight to work hard, to discover their gifts early, to develop them diligently. And then when we deploy them out into the world, it won't be as scary for them or for us. Um, there's no way Daniel's parents would have known when he was born that as a young teenager he was going to be taken from them. There's no way they knew that. But they instilled character in his heart. They instilled loyalty to God in him first and foremost that would guide the decisions while at the same time developing his gifts. And both of those aspects put Daniel in the right place at the right time to make a difference in history because they made a priority out of character. But then they also worked hard to develop his gifts and his abilities. And I pray that we'll work to do the same thing for the young people that are under our care. Tomorrow, actually not tomorrow, tomorrow is our Wednesday night Bible study, which hopefully you've received an email. We're going to try to do that on Zoom tomorrow, but we will be back on Facebook as well. If you don't want to do it on Zoom, Facebook will be there. Thursday is kids night, but Friday when we come back, we're going to be talking about RESPECT. Pretty sure there's a song written about that somewhere. But we're going to talk about respect. Something that was just naturally taught and ingrained in young people that has seemed to disappear a little bit in the lives of young people, and talking about how to biblically ingrain that in them, and I hope that'll be a help to you in the future. So hope you guys have a great night. Just reading some of these comments here. It's great to see some of the other ones chime in here. Cheryl Tucker, Joan Freeman, I appreciate you. And we'll definitely keep Daniel and Karen in our prayers. Tell them that we love them and appreciate you guys as well. I hope you guys have a good rest of the night. We'll talk to you later.